Good morning, friends and acquaintances, Izen here. Today we are talking about tanks in the Midnight beta. We are both looking at their current state, their current performance, the current interest behind them just by looking at how many players are exactly playing each of the tanks, how they have been changed from the War Within to Midnight and how they are currently doing. Because, here's the spoiler, very early on, this is how you would be placing tanks in the Midnight beta, purely based by, well, how high are the Mythic Plus keys they have been doing, for example, and how popular are tanks at the higher end of these high keys right now. However, a lot of this can change. For example, just a few days ago, Death Knight would have been right next to Vengeance Demon Hunter. So, why exactly have they gone down so much? Well, the reason, very simply, is what we have covered already in our video dedicated to Blood Decay. Part of what was making them perform so well was the synergy with their last Apex talent, Dance of Midnight, which was spawning 3 Dancing Rune weapons, and this was triggering your Gift of the Sun Lane hero talent. It was still working, even though you weren't clicking Dancing Weapon yourself, you were still getting into Gift of the Sun Lane and still gaining the double value on Essence of the Blood Queen, etc, etc. This was fixed, on top of damage nerfs which you receive. So as a result, Blood Decay has lost a lot of, I guess, interest, hype. As you know, we have gone through this multiple times. Players just tend to play the most OP specs, even if it's the beta, even if it's there just for testing, for trying out the specs, you still congregate towards the specs that are performing the best, and that's why Blood lost a lot. And at the same time, in this rating right here, Paladin would be very low, because they have been the worst, essentially, tank, according to tanks playing in the beta. However, they are just about to receive a significant round of buffs, the ones we checked yesterday. They are not yet implemented in the beta, so we're not seeing the immediate results of those changes, but they are bound to, first of all, gather a lot more interest from tank players and likely jump up at very minimum on par with Brewmaster, if not even outright next to Vengeance Demon Hunter. Vengeance, which also has been nerfed in their damage, in at least the Aldrachi version of Vengeance has been nerfed, as well as their self-healing, their soul fragment self-healing has been nerfed. So currently, at the very least, based on how they have been doing, Vengeance is still, comfortably chilling at number 1, even after their nerfs we have just mentioned they have gotten in this last round of the beta. Vengeance at the moment has, let's just say, simplified itself a little bit too much. No joke, this is what one of the highest keys in the beta is being completed as a Vengeance Demon Hunter. You don't play around Spirit Bomb, keeping up Demon Spikes now is practically 100% uptime without you having to think about it too much. You have lost the necessary min-maxing around stacking multiple applications of frailty, because that entire mechanic has been removed, as well as any extra tinkering around CDR of your sigils, and you have also effectively lost much of the value of your Sigil of Flame, which is now very disappointing to even use, as well as currently Fell Devastation being terrible to the point you don't even press it. So it is a disaster. Yes, it is currently the most popular one because it does the job the best, both in terms of damage, it's among the highest one, and in terms of self-healing, it's very, very straightforward. You don't really have any multiple applications of your self-healing. Is really just consuming your souls through your spam of Soul Cleave. That's all you're doing. So first in line is perhaps the most divisive one, because if you had to put it on a tier, they would be in the S tier, both in terms of current performance and also in terms of brain cells you lose if you play Vengeance right now, because it has become the Beast Mastery Hunter of tanks, it has become the Holy Priest of tanks. Very, very straightforward. I guess you can go and play, if you want to hurt yourself and become weaker, you can go and play Annihilator, because at least if you play Annihilator you have more reasons to play Fell Devastation, but even more importantly Spirit Bomb, which is key to playing with the hero talent of Annihilator. So you get more buttons to press, at the very least, but not much else. So the pros right now, very good in terms of efficiency and performance. The cons is the worst tank spec in terms of playstyle right now, because of the damage it has suffered from the, I guess, pruning and simplification from the War Within. Next in line, you have Brewmaster Monk. Brewmaster Monk is perhaps, well, we can't say the opposite because they're not doing terrible damage. They are in fact doing very good damage, but they are the opposite in terms of playstyle because they are still playing very nicely in this beta, even though they haven't changed too much. So even if we're talking about the pruning of the War Within, you still have Keg Smash and Breath of Fire as your default combo, and Tiger Palm and Blackout Kick as a follow-up, and in terms of defensives you still have your Purifying Brew and Celestial Brew and Infusion as your bread and butter, with the longer cooldowns of your Nuzal, your Ox, and your Fortifying Brew. So it's still all there, you haven't really gotten pruned in much, and the way you play is still very smooth. You know, having the Keg Smash always follow up your Breath of Fire, resetting in your CDs, the addition of your Exploding Keg that you can use, plus the new expansions extra of Vital Flame is very good because it does help one of the more frustrating things of Brewmaster Monk, which was their chronic lack of constant self-healing. Brewmaster was one of the more typical requires a healer to survive kind of tank, unlike something like a Blood Death Knight. Brewmaster did need help in that department, but in this expansion at the moment, between your Apex talents, Refreshing Drink, and your Vital Flame talent, you have increased ways to self-heal. You haven't lost your already existing self-healing tools from the War Within, so Guy Pleen's Imperial Brew, the instant heal when you purify your stagger, Celestial Fortune, Gift of the Ox, Ox and Fortitude, those are still there. On top of that, you have Vital Flame, which is very good, especially with the current strongest hero talent, Shadowpan, because Flurry Strikes are majority nature damage. Because what you care about Flurry Strike aren't actually the Flurry Strikes themselves, it's just a tiny hero talent which makes Flurry Strikes explode for nature damage, which is going to be converted for 50% value into healing, and then Breath of Fire, which is fire damage, so also gets converted into healing. So it's a very good passive stream of self-healing, plus the new Epic Talent's Refreshing Drink. This is very good because it's a very potent self-heal on yourself. It is tied behind Fortifying Brew, which is whatever, because Fortifying Brew's cooldown is very big, but Celestial Infusion's cooldown or Celestial Brew's cooldown is much shorter, so you can guarantee this from running at all times when it's needed in tough pulls, in tough moments between your own charges of Celestial Brew, the cooldown reduction of your brews, and your own Black Ox Brew to also reset the cooldown. It's a very good self-healing tool, plus bonus point, it also heals 2 nearby allies, so you have some semblance of party utility by giving some pretty strong heal to other players in your party. And at the moment, alongside these positive additions for Brewmaster, the performance is also quite good. They are one of the more popular tanks right now, present and visible in the higher end, the higher level of keys in Mythic Plus as well. So it does feel very, very good. One of the major weaknesses being, at the very least, attempted to be addressed. Your self-healing being more consistent overall with these new additions, the talent and the Apex talent helping you, are making Brewmaster Monk quite promising at the moment in the beta. Now, the asterisk in here, talking about being promising, is Prot Paladin. We have had the video about the balance tuning, talking about this at length. The current situation is it's very weak. Your Word of Glory is a joke. It heals for barely anything. Practically, you are stuck just not even or barely even using it. You just heal with your plethora of other ways to self-heal yourself, mostly around your Avenger Shield's self-heal from the dot it creates, or the absorb shield from the damage of Avenger's Shield. But we can't talk about too much about Prot right now because it's work in progress. They have the big set of buffs being launched, not yet implemented though, so we have to wait any further effects on these buffs for Protection Paladin. We will see in a few days the effects, but even speculating from the effects of this tuning, it is likely bound to become significantly stronger. Both the armor, the base armor increase you're receiving, plus the armor increase of Shield of the Righteous, and now Word of Glory being doubled in value, there are good chances it's gonna go in the higher end of value for tanks at the moment. Now, as for another flavor of protection, which is still doing quite well right now, is Protection Warrior. Protection Warrior used to be much lower down in terms of value, mostly because their damage was laughable, so Blizzard just patched them a few days ago by simply basically doubling their damage. That's what they did. Protection Warrior, if you were enjoying Prot in the War Within, we can kind of end the discussion right here because it's still the same Protection Warrior. Ignore Pain and Shield Block as your main mitigators of damage, Revenge and Shield Slam as your main damage abilities, also proccing multiple other tools in your spec, plus the final point, which becomes much more important, of course, if you're playing Mountain, which is Thunderclap. This is still the base of Protection Warrior, even in Midnight. Not much is changing in this regard for Protection Warrior, even after the buffs. Most of the buffs, as mentioned, were damage focused, not really about the way you play, even down to your main playstyles, for example, around your avatar uptime, which is actually even similar to what you have in live, near 50% if you're playing Mountain, closer to a third of the uptime if you're playing Colossus. Prot Warrior, not only is it being played quite a lot towards the higher end of keys right now, but it's also the more, if seemingly, the more complete in terms of specs, in terms of tanks, mostly because, yeah, that could be a negative if you were expecting changes. If you didn't like Prot from the War Within, then it's not good news, because right now it does work, as mentioned, very similar to what it does in the War Within. So either this is very good news for you because you were already plenty happy in how Prot Warrior was working, so you have no problem with it, or it's bad because you couldn't stand Prot Warrior from the War Within and you are not getting a lot to change right now in the beta. After Prot Warrior, you have Guardian Druid. Guardian Druid is towards the bottom end of tanks, as mentioned. It was next to Protection Paladin, as well as Blood Decay. Post-nerf Blood Decay, we have to say. Now, Guardian did receive some quite good changes overall, which also already started from the War Within. The Apex Talent is one of the not good things they received, as right now quite a few of these changes are redundant in the value they give you, like Maul being always empowered and dealing 40% additional natural damage over 12 seconds, except it doesn't stack. It doesn't reapply or pile on top of itself, so you kind of are locked, not mauling for 12 seconds unless you want to waste the dot created by your Apex Talent. It's very disappointing in how it works. Or the effect itself further empowering things like Frenzied Regen being echoed and repeated when it already has a very high overhealing value anyways. You were expecting or kind of wishing for being buffed in somewhere else other than things like Maul or Frenzied Regen. But the talent changes did give you certain ways to empower talents or give more value to talents you previously didn't care too much about. Mangle has been significantly improved over time. It took a while. One of the bitter QOLs with Harnessed Rage, Mangle having 2 charges now, and if you have at least 80 rage when you mangle, you guarantee gore gets triggered, so you guarantee to reset the cooldown of Mangle. Practically get the Mangle off for free because it resets the CD and the charge of Mangle. Now, what is perhaps a bit more failed at the moment is the attempt at dividing the spec between the animal side of the tree and the druid spellcaster side of the tree, the arcane damage on the right and just a normal beast damage on the left, mostly because at the moment they are both easily takeable by skipping the weakest of the talents, and you end up doing the same thing in both. So even if you play with Druid of the Claw, you still have your empowered Moonfires from Galactic Guardian, you're still playing around Lunar Beam, you're still playing with Luna's Favored, trying to get some more self-healing with arcane damage. It doesn't really change that much if you're swapping from Druid of the Claw to Luna's Chosen. At the moment, I would say the weakest part are the Apex Talents, though. It is a 2-in-1, not only because the Apex Talents are supposed to be this big thing, so you're already expecting something nice. On top of that, this Apex Talent is tied and triggers with Incarnation, so it's a 3-minute cooldown. Even if you can reduce then the CDR of Incarnation down to about 2, maybe, it's still a long cooldown. You have to wait for this Apex Talent, and then what it does is just not good enough right now. but the core, the base of the spec is quite nice. It doesn't necessarily change too much from the War Within, but the amount, that's the important part, the amount of QOLs the talent tree, your spec talent tree for example, has received are quite visible compared to a few other specs which have remained way more similar to the War Within, like for example Protection Warrior. Now, last one was Blood Death Knight, as we mentioned, fallen towards the bottom of the, I guess, performance results and also the popularity. Most of this though has to do primarily with the nerf they have received. So we have gone through a full video dedicated to Blood Decay and how it works right now in Midnight's beta. You are quite unfortunately losing some QOLs that were quite good in the War Within, like for example playing Sun Lane's Visceral Strength, getting you infinite charges of Bone Shield, because in AoE you were generating Bone Shield charges from Visceral Strength, from Blood Boil. Now that is gone, which has to significantly increase your Marrow-Rend casts per minute, which is very boring, because Marrow-Rend does nothing, does no damage, procs, nothing else. It's very annoying to having to cast this maintenance buff on yourself so often. It's quite a sad affair right now in the beta. We have mentioned the damage nerf, which is whatever. Getting nerfed in damage doesn't change the way you play. It does hurt a bit more, the nerf, that now your free spawns of Dancing Weapon no longer proc your entire Sun Lane hero talent, but that was kind of expected as it was just way too strong. However, it was quite cool, hence probably why so many players were playing Blood before the nerf. So fundamentally, after the set of changes of a few days ago, you have downgraded from the War Within. What is perhaps the main major change really going from the War Within to Midnight, at the very least for now, is the much higher increased casts per minute of your Heart Strike in Midnight compared to the War Within. But besides that, especially if, as you were already playing in live, you weren't playing Sun Lane in Mythic Plus, you were playing Deathbringer, so as Deathbringer you already were casting Marrow-Rend a whole lot in Mythic Plus anyways, so you won't really feel much of a difference going into Midnight and still having to press that button a whole lot in Mythic Plus. So it will feel the same, just with fewer defensive buttons to press, because, you know, as compared to live, you are losing Rune Tap, you are losing Tombstone, you are losing Blood Drinker as a choice, or Mark of Blood as a choice. Now you only have basically the only extra defensive button, defensive layer button you can choose by yourself in Midnight is just Consumption, which might have some decent usages at the very late stages of high-end keys because of the damage reduction it offers you, but not much else. So it does show you a bit of a weakness in the player base, definitely, in wanting naturally to play the strongest characters, even in a beta setting. It has hurt Blood Decay after their nerf. But we also have to be honest and say that yes, the nerf has weakened the playstyle of the spec, because going from freely using your damage abilities and more often popping up your Vampiric Strike, from being inside of Essence of the Blood Queen, as well as not really needing to press Marrow-Rend that much, was a better playstyle than what we had to go back to after the nerfs, which is more similar to how Blood is playing right now in live. As mentioned back at the beginning, this is the current state of tanks from a power perception perspective of the player base, obviously with the point about Prot Paladin soon to be buffed, likely going up to A, if not more, in terms of power level, but also if we had to go by their current state based on the changes they have received from the War Within, how positive they have gotten from the War Within, between how much of the pruning they have received, how many QOL additions they have received, then it would probably look more like this, with the absolute disaster that are Vengeance changes, the somewhat disappointing changes of Blood Decay, and then the okay, quite nice additions of Prot Warrior and the Prot Paladin's changes, including the ones they are about to receive in this latest round of tuning, with the better ones overall being from Guardian and Brewmaster, even though Guardian does need some more definition between their two hero talents, and more importantly, the Apex talent itself needs to be improved. But For today though, on this Thursday, this is what we have as far as the state of tanks in the beta, from their changes compared to the War Within, and also the perceived power level purely by playing them in the content in Midnight, according to the player base and how much and how far they have been playing these tanks so far. So, for today, this is enough. We can now leave each other. We're starting our goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who have been supporting Competitive for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, slowly, over time, I could feel my voice going away. I'm not sure how much I have left.